Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich, CEO of Massolutions, the world's only no bullshit marketing firm. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Gillette Be Better ad. If you haven't seen it or read about it or heard about it, I'd be surprised. It's an ad that was done by Gillette about toxic masculinity and tying a little bit to the hashtag Me Too movement. And it's similar in some ways to the Nike Colin Kaepernick ad in that both ads were extremely well done, high-end production, good content, and can be a little bit controversial to a segment, some small segments or maybe big segments of the audience. As I mentioned about the Nike ad, my first point related to the Gillette ad ties it back with the Nike ad. People talk about these ads and some people say, whoa, what a brave thing to do, or wow, they took a risk. And as I said after the Colin Kaepernick ad, Nike didn't take a risk, and you can go back to that podcast and that blog post if you want to see those 3 or 4 points. But the same thing here. This wasn't risky. Gillette is doing an ad that with such high production value and a message that makes common sense to a lot of people and resonates positively with a lot of people. And then they did a couple things in the ad that have resonated negatively with some people. But they gain all kinds of discussion, all kinds of free public relations, and there really isn't a downside. Now, to date, their sales have remained at the level that they were pre-campaign, so it is not hurting sales. The Nike ad actually saw sales increase over time. So it isn't hurting sales, it isn't necessarily helping sales, but it's generating a lot of exposure and a lot of coverage. It's not a big risk to do an ad like this. The second point is the ad comes out and begins by talking about some of the things that are going on in the world today, but then starts to give examples of how boys act and men act. And there are people that have told me, well, I was offended because it's boy bashing, and I have 3 sons. And I will tell you, there's a lot of interesting things that happen with sons in elementary school and so forth versus daughters, and life's tough. That's the way I put it. Life's tough, and life isn't fair. So there's stuff that happens, so I understand when people get worked up about boy bashing. But when I look at the entire ad, my second point is that as a dad who was raised by a dad who was nurturing, my dad wasn't afraid to cry at a movie in front of you. My dad admitted mistakes. My dad said he loved you. My dad treated people with respect, and he treated people equally. It didn't matter what your last name was. It didn't matter the color of your skin. It didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. My dad treated you the same way. Now, he's not perfect. He's closer to perfect than most people, a lot closer than me, because I'm far from perfect. But he treated people with respect, and he treated people equally. So from my standpoint, as I watched this, I wasn't offended. I was just like, oh, that stuff shouldn't be happening, and let's do what we can to stop that. Some people got offended because they felt that it was really slamming, universally slamming, and I do think that's a problem if we continue to portray things as one group is the same, because all women aren't the same, all men aren't the same. There are women that do things that are problematic. There are men that do things that are problematic. The ad shouldn't be coming across as that's labeling all men. I didn't take it that way, but some did. The third point ties to being a leader. I've been blessed that I was given opportunities very early, and they were difficult opportunities, so I want to make sure it's not like I was privileged in getting opportunities. What happened was I took a chance at companies that were going under. But while I was at those companies that were going under, I was able to work with some really great people on the team. And then I was able to move into the corporate world and work in larger companies, so I've had the mix of both. As a leader, when I see the one scene in the Gillette ad, when the man stops the woman who's talking, cuts her off and says, what I think she's trying to say is, and what I think she means is, I've seen that happen, and I think it's bad. But I've also seen it happen with someone interrupting a guy, too. I think there are some people that just flat out are insecure when they're in a presentation situation and interrupt. Is it more prevalent with women? I'm thinking yes. I don't have quantitative evidence. I have qualitative evidence, but I think yes. I've strived as a leader to talk about and hear from everybody, but most importantly, I'm looking for diversity of ideas. I want the best ideas at the table to solve problems. If the best idea comes from a snail, I want the snail at the conference room table. I don't care what your name is, what you look like, what your age is. I want the best ideas. So as a leader, I saw that and said, that does go on. I've witnessed it going on. I lead in a different way, and that's going to be a competitive advantage for me. So I would say that when the people get offended by that and say that that's labeling men, or if someone out there is naive enough to think that is how all men are in the workplace, that person's wrong. Whoever says that, if anyone out there thinks that's indicative of most men, the majority, you're wrong. You're doing what stereotyping, just like what you are criticizing. It isn't most men. It isn't the majority, but it's happening. And it's prevalent. So if you're someone that knows it's not the majority and you're not in that style, you can see that as a competitive advantage. So you can begin to work on that and use that and leverage that as your competitive advantage, because you are including people and you are looking for diversity of ideas. Now, my fourth point ties to consistency and fairness, because I mentioned my dad, but I want to mention my mom, who gave me the fairness gene. If something's not fair, it really bugs me. Anyone that's worked with me, played for me as a coach, worked on my teams, knows that fairness matters a lot to me. Consistency matters a lot to me. I want to make sure we're fair and consistent so that we don't just portray men as idiots. You know, I can recall back to when I was a teenager, and the number one show in the country was The Cosby Show. And this doctor, played by Bill Cosby, was a blabbering idiot at home as the dad. He was the butt of the jokes. He was the fool, etc. And I always thought, he's funny and all, but that's not my dad. My dad's not the butt of the jokes in the house. My dad's, he's involved with all of us. We're all talking, we're all having fun, but there's no like, he's not always wrong. He's not the fool. And so I have seen that portrayal over time in many shows and sitcoms. And I think that's wrong, just as I think portraying a mom as a certain way in a subservient role and cooking dinner or cleaning the house, that's wrong too. So what I look up for is fairness and consistency. And what I'm hoping that we can do is convey the message that, yes, be better. I think that's a great line for men, and I think it's a great line for women. Be better. We can all be better. But let's be consistent and fair. Let's not bash and just point out the negatives. Let's point out the positives, because lifting women up doesn't mean putting men down. What it means is lift women up. Women deserve every opportunity that a man has. Women can do great things as men can do great things. Lifting them women up and being positive and supporting #MeToo, that's all positive, but we don't have to put all men down, and we don't have to stereotype all men or even the majority of men. What we have to do is be fair, be consistent, because again, lifting women up doesn't mean putting men down. That's my 4 main points on the Gillette Me Too Be Better ad. And that's this episode of the No BS Marketing Show, recorded from our studios in bold, beautiful downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.